Want to take a ride? Climb aboard the Anomaly train with me, where we'll discuss everything from skinwalkers and UAPs to angels and NDEs. My name is C.K. Shali, and I've been a seeker of the metaphysical, the miraculous, and the phenomenal for 6 decades. What I found, I want to share with you. So come along for the ride, and let's see where we'll end up. All right, welcome to this episode of the Anomaly Train. The anomalies we are talking about today involve Skinwalker Ranch. More specifically, though, the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, a new book, the subtitle, An Insider's Account of the Secret Government UFO Program. It's written by James T. Lakatsky, Com A. Kelleher, and George Knapp. And when I got this book, or when I first heard about the book, I thought, oh, that's going to be dense and probably tough to get through. And I can say that actually I pretty much sat down and read it cover to cover. It's an easy read, and a lot of that has to do with George Knapp, who is an investigative reporter, one of the best in the business. And his hand in writing this makes it flow beautifully. For my guest today to discuss this with me is Mike Piccirilli. We were both avid fans of X-Files when it was on, and to both of us, the disclosure that came out in June of 2021 that the Pentagon has recognized that UFOs are real came with great excitement, only for us to find out that most people just didn't care, which was probably almost as shocking as the revelations that the Pentagon had recognized these things. Mike Piccirilli has been in the IT business for over 20 years. He's more of a nuts and bolts person than I am, and helps to keep me grounded. So Mike, welcome.
Howdy.
Hi. So let's see, maybe you can do us the favor and tell us a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch as to why they use the word skinwalkers at the Pentagon and how this all started.
Sure, I can do that. I'll preface it by saying this is the place you never want to go. Don't go there. There are armed guards for a reason. Don't go there. Anyway.
I will never go there, I can assure
right.
you.
Not without Dr. Strange and a whole bunch of Indian shamans. So anyway, so the deal is Skinwalker Ranch is a bunch of real estate in Utah that has been used as a ranch, thus the name, for quite a long time, at least 100 years. And it's located in the, was that the Uintah Basin?
Uintah, yep. Uintah
Basin, which is an area that is very heavily populated by indigenous peoples, specifically Navajo and the Utes. And historically, the Navajo and the Utes have been tribes that have gotten along, but have also had their disagreements and long-standing problems. And it was a point in the past that the Utes had entered into an agreement to capture and enslave Navajo, selling them off to either whites or Mexicans. And obviously, nobody likes to be enslaved. So,
yes, well, that's never a good idea.
No, never a good idea, especially not to do that to native peoples who can make your life very bad if they so chose. So the Navajo decided to do something about it and essentially cursed the Utes, and more importantly, cursed the ridgeline and area to be the domain of what are referred to by the native peoples as skinwalkers, which essentially are malevolent spirits or people who have entered into agreements with malevolent spirits that may or may not be extra dimensional in nature. And those spirits grant those people, in return for their agreement, obeisance, whatever that is that they're doing, they get powers. All kinds of weirdness and mayhem ensues from such people. Definitely not good people. So that's where the name originates. The reputation that the area has over the last 150 years or so has been one of very strange phenomena. Back in the day, it was lights, strange creatures, what we today would refer to as cryptids, and UFOs/UAPs, depending on your age and preference for the term. But it's been an area that has always had a reputation for having very bad things happen, and that the indigenous peoples of the area have, in no uncertain terms, labeled as off limits. Don't go there. Bad things will happen to you. So, of course, white people settled the area and built a ranch there, because that's what they do.
That's what they do.
And of course, mayhem and weirdness ensued. Now, to be fair, the people who owned the land prior to the Shermans did not report a great deal of weird activity. They were, however, according to George Knapp's research, said they were the ones who passed down to the Shermans, don't dig on the ranch. Bad things happen when you dig. Now,
and they also, shall we point out that they had many locks upon their doors and treated their homestead as something that was under siege, and seemed quite happy to get out of there and sell it to the Shermans.
yes, that is true. So with a laugh and a wave, they were gone. And the Shermans, who wanted to be cattle ranchers, moved in a bunch of cattle, moved their family in, and proceeded to have a nightmare existence of their cattle and animals being mistreated, attacked, slaughtered,
Mutilated.
The people themselves being surveilled and having had different types of encounters with strangeness, or what I guess the proper term is high strangeness,
Yes.
occurring there, to the point where their entire livelihood, which would be the cattle operation, began to become unviable. And they in turn, were beginning to get desperate when they were approached by a gentleman named Bigelow, Robert Bigelow, who is a billionaire industrialist slash
Aerospace.
in the aerospace and business guy. A lot at the time, mostly into aerospace, but also into investigating different types of weird phenomenon because of the personal interests of Robert Bigelow. And if you're Tony Stark and you got that much money, you can fund these types of investigations. And that's what he did. He established NIDS, which is was the National Investigative.
Oh, geez, I wrote that down and promptly lost it.
it was a scientific research organization
Yes.
that Bigelow founded, that when he purchased the ranch from the Shermans, he brought in teams of investigators and security people and lots of scientific equipment. And for the space of 8 years, 6, 7 years, he conducted, which was to that time, the most thorough investigation of a paranormal site that had been conducted.
Yep, and I've got the acronym list right here. NIDS was Network Intrusion Detection System. And I don't know about you, but if you've had any connection to governments or corporation, they love acronyms.
Yes.
And boy, reading these things, they throw the acronyms around like crazy. So NIDS, we'll try to give them to you so that you understand what they are, at least to begin with, and then you can promptly forget them, because who wouldn't? So yes, so Robert Bigelow arrives. George Knapp sheds light on this problem. And I do want to point out that skinwalkers are elsewhere. One of the more interesting videos that I had watched on YouTube is the Navajo Rangers, Jonathan Dover in particular, who tells of some of the work that he and his co-workers did on the Navajo reservation or in the Four Corners area. So skinwalkers can be encountered anywhere. It just seems to be that the Uinta Valley and Skinwalker Ranch in particular has more probably per square or per acre than most other places in the world. So yes, so now Robert Bigelow has arrived. NIDS is set up with all their equipment. And how does that go?
Not well. Well, initially, they were able to record certain types of phenomena, visual things, types of activity, spikes in radiation. But what they found was that the phenomena, to give the entire situation a name, and seems to be the popular name, or has become the popular name for this type of activity. Phenomena is fickle. The phenomena seems to know when you are trying to gather data, information, and trying to record it, and thwarts you. So if you have your cameras pointed at a particular location, it might do something or manifest itself in some way just to the right or left of the field of vision for that camera. Or it might choose to disable that camera, or draw the power out of the device that you're using to record data, such as a cell phone, a Geiger counter, one of their multimeter type devices that records different types of energy signatures. They experience random deaths of their devices due to power failure all the time, which is in and of itself weird. But Bigelow and NIDS did their best to record stuff, and in the process of their conducting that investigation, representatives from the government became involved, heard about some of the more strange things that were being reported there, besides the UFOs and the the general lights in the sky. They became interested in some of the more what would seem to be paranormal effects, the radiation coming out of the ground or out of the sky, the noises underground, the cryptids, and most disturbingly, what the on-site observers would refer to more often as time went on as what they suspected to be portals of some kind. They would see openings appear in the sky where they could see a different sky on the other side of the opening. Or more disturbingly, see something climb out of the opening.
Yeah.
There was a reference that really put the hook in me when I was reading about it, of the ranchers observing a portal appear in midair where they could see a darker sky on the other side of the portal than what they could see where they were standing. And they described a humanoid figure somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 9 feet tall, completely black, no facial features whatsoever, climb out of the portal and proceed to run up the hill next to the portal and disappear from sight.
So I
That
think,
would have been enough for me to call in the choppers.
yeah, exactly. I think what's happening is that the intent was to go there and find nuts and bolts documented evidence of things happening there. And what began to happen is that it crossed over from nuts and bolts to strangely paranormal. And paranormal things in ways that couldn't be pinned down, couldn't be measured, couldn't be documented, because the very test equipment they were using to measure it could get disabled and would simply stop working. And I was looking at the Hunt for the Skinwalker book. Both, by the way, The Hunt for the Skinwalker is by George Knapp, as is Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. Both are available in Amazon if you want to order them. They are excellently written. And it shows how hard it was to get any information. But at the same time, reading the reviews, the reviews are saying, well, I wish they'd taken pictures. Why didn't they take more photographs of this? And it's not that they didn't try.
Yeah, did they read the book?
Yeah,
If we were asked
exactly.
that, did they read the book?
Yeah.
It wasn't for lack of trying.
I think from the first time I saw the first Skinwalker episode on, I think it was Bedtime Stories on YouTube, I've been hooked. Skinwalker Ranch and the Skinwalker phenomena has been an obsession of mine from the first time I heard about it, because if this is all true, if this is all real, the world I'm living in is very different than the one I was brought up to believe in. This stuff just can't be happening. And yet we are getting it on very good authority from scientists, from level-headed people, from investigating reporters, that yes, this is exactly what is happening. Now, one of the other things that are connected to this is that a whole lot of the let's get to the Pentagon part of this. Now we take a little detour into UFO investigations, and we have a flurry of acronyms. We have OSAP, AAWSAP. If you don't have heard of OSAP, luckily you won't have to pronounce it very often. It is the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program. I can't even fathom. Yeah, exactly. It just rolls right off the tongue. I don't know who invents these things, but it's just amazing to me, the alphabet soup that they come up with. Also connected to that was BAASS, BASS, sort of a drawn out sheep version of BASS. That is Robert Bigelow's contribution to this. That BASS is the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. I noticed the word advanced keeps being used a lot here. I don't know whether that was ego or what, but tend to throw in advanced quite often. That leads us to ATIP, which was part of OSAP. That is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And that's when it starts to get fun, because one of our favorite people in the world right now was the head of that, and that's Lou Elizondo. Can you tell us a little bit about Lou Elizondo and fill us in on that, Mike?
Yeah.
What's he like?
Lou Elizondo has seen some shit. Lou
He has-
Elizondo is one of those guys that if you've, you know, when you talk to people and you start to get to the point where you evaluate somebody, you know, when you meet somebody, you gauge them and stuff. He's the kind of person that within 5 minutes, you know, this is somebody who's you know, a smart guy, an intelligent guy, a guy who is well trained, a guy who is very personable, but a guy who has had to deal with and work through a whole bunch of stuff. And it's just etched into his face. Just etched all over his face. The way the man speaks, you can tell that this is a guy who is used to parsing language in order to be able to communicate with the person he's talking to without saying more than he should. A lot of people take him to task for that, you know, because this is a man who, in the course of his duty to his country, had to sign, I'm sure, more than a few non-disclosure agreements to work what he had to work and to do what he had to do. But those agreements don't expire. They have to be observed or there are penalties. Now, this is a guy that strikes me as having seen stuff that his conscience tells him needs to be changed or needs to be brought out into the open. But everything that he has had to do in the past opposes that. And that's why he had to end up taking the roads that he took, which, you know, led him to where he is now. At this point in time, however, he is still working for the Defense Intelligence Agency in our story. So as the DIA sends their representatives out to Skinwalker while NIDS is doing their thing, they become very interested in investigating it further. And so that's why OSAP gets set up, or one of the reasons why OSAP gets set up. A bid is put out for a civilian company to manage the operation because, frankly, the Defense Intelligence Agency and DoD like to keep themselves distanced from anything that whiffs even remotely about the paranormal, since their work with the Stargate program and MK Ultra, and there are various other activities over the years. They like deniability. So the bid went out. Robert Bigelow's company came up with it, and thus we went from NIDS working there to BASS working there. BASS got the contract for the first year or 2 years, I don't recall, that OSAP operated before OSAP's funding was cut. Now, one of the guys that worked on some of the material with OSAP was Elizondo. Elizondo carried on the investigation after OSAP was terminated by having its funding cut. He did so within the Pentagon, DoD, in a separate program, separate but branched program called ATIP. That didn't get funding. That was unfunded, right? So they're two distinct programs, and Elizondo was much more involved with ATIP, whereas Kelleher and Lukatsky were much more involved with BASS and OSAP.
And now, just to catch people up on where we are now, neither one of those programs are continuing because due to all of this attention And I mean, there's been a great deal of it from different areas. And I will briefly mention Leslie Kean, who wrote an article for the New York Times in 2017, revealing what has become the famous incident with the Tic Tac UFO. And she's started the ball rolling to some extent. Then we have Tom DeLonge, along with Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, who formed the basis of, and well, I should say Jim Semivan too, the To the Stars Academy. They did a fantastic series called Unidentified on the history.
Don't forget Hal Puthoff.
Don't forget Hal. Okay.
Right.
And they put this,
one of the fathers of remote viewing.
yes, there's a whole lot of influences of things that have been going on for a very long time. And they put together this program called Unidentified, which is excellent. If you never catch it,
It is.
Please do so. It really is very well done. And the pressure starts building, the pressure increases, and everyone is starting to look into this. And Congress is saying, wait a minute, we don't know about this. I think you need to report to us. And that is what Preem did, the revelation in June of 2021. Since then, they have developed a completely new acronym that is unpronounceable. It is AOIMSG. And seriously, people just call it AEIOU, and I can totally understand it because this is ridiculous. That stands for Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. What are they managing? Huh? What'd you say?
I said, I think I would work backwards. I'd come up with the acronym.
Really?
And then I'd make words fit it. You know, come up with, they might as well say Mr. Mexelplick is the damn, is the damn acronym now. Come on.
It is hysterical. And I have to say, wait a minute. Okay, airborne object identification. I can kind of ride with that, but management, what the heck are you managing? You can't manage those things.
You're managing your lower jaw so that you can push it back up into your mouth when you see something go by at 12,000 miles an hour. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, management and synchronization. That just, so I guess you're basically, they spend all their time managing and synchronizing each other, whether they'll come up with anything.
Are you ready? No. How about now? No. How about now? Yes. Success. Alert the Pentagon.
You're that's too close to the truth, I think, to even be laughable. I mean, what are you doing? But anyway, that's where we stand now. And at least it is being looked into, thanks to Senator Gillibrand and Marco Rubio and the late Harry Reid. So something's being done about it. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is that while all this is developing from, oh my goodness, George Knapp to Leslie Kean on up, there is something called the hitchhiker effect. And yeah, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't go there. That's why I wouldn't go there without Dr. Strange, because what happens is all of the weirdness that happens on that ranch. And if you ever watched, I don't have cable TV, but I've been able to watch the first season of the hell is the show that they did? Was it The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch? Is that the show? That the name of it?
So yes, I think
on History Channel,
or The Hunt for Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if it was The Hunt or The Secret, but basically,
I saw the first season. Yeah. So, well, I forgot what my point was going to be.
The hitchhikers, about going.
Okay, yeah, the hitchhiker thing. So the first episode of that is they getting some astrophysicist guy, who sadly reminds me of George Bush because he's very, very Texan, and he comes up with dumb ideas. But anyway, they get this guy and they're talking to him and he's like, well, yeah, this could be interesting and we could find stuff out and this thing and the stuff and the thing and the place and all that. Nobody tells this guy before he accepts the job, by the way, all this weird shit that happens here, yeah, it follows you home and invites itself into your house with your family at home. People who've worked at the ranch and have experienced stuff on the ranch have found that when they go home, they keep experiencing stuff. Stuff like weird black shapes or humanoid shapes, like hanging around in their bedroom, stomping sounds through the house, or still orbs of different colors visiting. And during the research and stuff, orbs aren't exactly the things you want touching you, because bad things tend to happen, as the book indicates,
Yes.
from a health perspective, when you get too close to different aspects of the phenomena. And these people are terrified at home. It's like having, they describe it as having, living through, a ghost movie, a poltergeist movie, something along those lines. And then sometimes it goes away and sometimes it doesn't. And
One of the
I
things
just,
that, go ahead. One of the things that I can't even imagine dealing with this. I forget whose wife it was who was looking out the window, and there is the equivalent of what a werewolf would look like. A 6 or 7 foot creature covered in black fur, shaped like a wolf, standing up, watching her right outside the house.
wasn't it leaning against a tree or something?
Leaning against a tree, yeah, exactly.
All he needed to be doing was smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
Have a slouch hat on. What the hell?
I can't even imagine looking out and seeing this and just going on with life without screaming and calling the police and everything else. But no, she just kind of, said, oh, all right, let's roll with it.
She did the old Eddie Murphy. Oh, that's peculiar.
It's like, are you kidding me? And then I think it was Leslie King. Yes, it was Leslie King when she first went to visit the ranch. She was only there for a couple days. They're walking around and I think it was dusk or dark. Okay, I won't even go to the ranch, never mind walking around in dusk or dark. That's just right out. Okay, and draw the line through that. But while they're standing there, things get quiet. Okay, that scares me right there. Things get quiet. Things feel strange. We can kind of guess how that feels. And they see this, they call it the dino beaver. And it's shaped,
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's shaped something like a small stegosaurus that is crossed with a beaver and just goes walking by. And it's almost like there's a lot of time slips that happen there. And it's like, what did they time slip back 1,000,000 years or so? I can't even imagine. And then Leslie, too, she had stuff follow her home. And by the way, she's the top investigative reporter too. She's not just a nobody. She writes for the New York Times and other.
And she's been doing this for a while. She's been
Yes.
at this basic topic for a long time. And the reason I mention that is that gives her, that experience gives her the same or the very similar advantage that Knapp has. He's been at this topic. He knows all of these people. He's been doing this forever. And he comes across as the guy who could sniff out the BS, from about a mile away, because he's been doing it for 40 years, 30 years. So she comes across the same way, very competent, very discerning. I would give her points for fearless because I wouldn't have gone to that damn ranch.
Well,
I might not go to that ranch with Lou Elizondo and all the weapons we can carry. I don't know that they do any good.
I know. Well,
do any good.
If I had to go, I would want Lou Elizondo to be the person that I'm standing behind.
Yeah.
Lou, you go on ahead. I'll be right behind you.
You know, we'd put on the infrared goggles and stuff, and you know, have M4s and stuff, but I don't know that it would do any good other than you'd see it coming at you. That's about it.
Yeah, good point. Good
That's
point.
about it.
Sure, I believe it was her boyfriend who left because the wine bottles went flying across the room, and she brought it home. Whatever it is, it followed her home and started throwing wine bottles around to the point where her boyfriend up and left. I'm moving out of here.
And it has nothing to do with proximity.
No,
nothing. And it goes right that, which brings that, and that is one of the reasons why DIA became so interested, because it has nothing to do with proximity. It has more to do with entanglement. It deals with the quantum entanglement that once you've been exposed, once your atoms have been exposed to the phenomena, now you have a quantum entanglement with it. So you can then leave, you know, Utah, and you can go to Paris. You can go to Moscow. It's going to be right there waiting for you.
They in the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book, they refer to it as an infectious agent model. So they talk about it in terms of infection as being for one person to another. But I sort of like the quantum entanglement idea better. And to get more personal now, one of the things that happens with the hitchhiker effect is also, and with lots of other UFO exposures in the past, is the diseases, the afflictions that follow exposure. I'm just going to read this one paragraph here out of the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book. And there's a very important reason I'm turning to this right now, but let me just read this. On page 135, under the chapter, OSAP findings from Skinwalker Ranch. So therefore, among certain people, the phenomenon can invade households, family groups, and communities, and acting like an infectious entity can cause these small groups harm. And in parentheses, says health and well-being, close paren. Skinwalker Ranch participants have transmitted the contagion to family members, many of whom in turn have been diagnosed with autoimmune disease, including Sjogren's syndrome, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, myasthenia gravis, Graves' disease, systemic lupus erythematosus, in parens lupus, that's usually how it's referred to, simply as that, rheumatoid diseases, fibromyalgia, and more. And in italics, they put, this finding can be considered one of the signature advances from the OSAP program. And I have heard Lou Elizondo say that can also be considered a threat. And the reason that I bring this up is that that may be the thing that directly affects you from all of this, because it has directly affected both of us. Mike suffers from, well, you say it so I don't violate any HIPAA laws. Mike, what is it?
I suffer from extreme bouts of self-delusion. No, I suffer from myasthenia gravis.
He has myasthenia gravis. I have Sjogren's. Both of us have autoimmune diseases. Now, as far as I know, I've never been abducted. As far as I know, I may not have been exposed to the type of things that happen on Skinwalker Ranch, although I've had some odd experiences. Did that do it? I don't know. Have I walked through a portal and never known? I don't know. But I find it suspicious that our interest is so intense in these things, which makes me think we may have had more exposure than we realize. I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Well, if you had posited to me, it's hard for me to answer that question, and here's why. I have had an interest and I have been, I wouldn't characterize myself as a researcher because that would give me more credit than I deserve.
No, I think you do a pretty good job.
For diligence purposes over the years, but ever since I was young, I have been interested in trying to figure out what is the deal with UFOs. Going through my parents' house lately, I've been coming across some of my old belongings, and I have found some of my books from childhood, and they are more than a couple of UFO books by Ruppelt and Keyhole and a lot of the older stuff. But my point is, I've always had an interest in it. I've always felt that there was far more to it than we were being told. But I never really thought too much about contact, nor did I ever recall a contact situation. However, as the years have gone on, and as I have gotten a bit more diligent in my studies of this topic, I find that once in a while, I come across items that have a resonance for me that seem to be more meaningful than they ought to be. They seem to mean more to me, or stand out to me more than they should.
Well put.
And
so it makes you wonder. Certainly
yeah,
makes you wonder.
it does. It does. And over the course of time, Carol and I have known each other a number of years. She has always been the more positive outlooked person. I have tended to be the more negative outlooked person. So when I've been, over the last few years since I became ill, when I haven't been ill, I've had time to do a lot more reading and looking at things and stuff. And I find that with respect to being abducted or the interest therein, it seems to me like that carries through to the overall population. The majority of the population don't seem to be terribly interested or concerned by the information that's being divulged over the last few years. But those that are very much interested and concerned. And obviously there are no statistics to support some type of an assertion like this, but one wonders if it coincides with the number of people that have had actual contact encounters, whether they can remember them or not.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with that one. I'm not at all sure where my interest comes from, but it has been from a very early age. And there could be any number of reasons for it. There is one of your favorite people by the name of Jacobs, I believe, who
David Jacobs.
Who is it now?
David A. Jacobs.
David A. Jacobs. Yes.
Former professor at Temple University.
Tell us a little bit about Mr. Jacobs and his assertions on hybrids.
Well, when the abduction phenomenon really began to become more in the mainstream awareness in the 90s, late 80s into the 90s, there were 3, maybe 4 primary researchers into the abduction experience. There was John Mack, there was Bud Hopkins, there was Yvonne Smith, and there was David Jacobs. Now, of the 4 of them at the time, David Jacobs was the only one who basically had reservations about the motives of the creatures that were performing these abductions. He was not entirely convinced that what they were doing was not harmful or had some type of a ulterior motive. As time went on, and it became clear that they were abducting people for genetic purposes and for conditioning purposes, and then a lot of all of the talk started to change towards the creation of these hybrid babies or hybrids, as the case may be. Those researchers started to hear different messages coming from the people they were interviewing. And one of the driving factors behind their, I would go so far as to say credibility, was that they were all hearing it from most of the people that they were working with across different countries and on different continents. The messages were the same. The experiences were the same. And they came to pass that they don't think that this was exactly a great idea, that it wasn't necessarily for our benefit. It was for the people, the intelligence, if you will, that was guiding the efforts for the hybridization. Well, since those days, Bud Hopkins has died of cancer. John Mack was killed in a quote unquote car accident. Yvonne Smith is still alive and David Jacobs is still alive. And now they both say this is for the purpose of essentially infiltration. In other words, you're creating, or they are creating actually, a bunch of people that are indistinguishable from Homo sapiens. Sadly, well, not sadly, but those people are not completely Homo sapien. And what the ultimate goal or ultimate agenda is, nobody seems to know. But as David Jacobs likes to say, this is the club that nobody really wants to be a member of. And it would be nice if he could say what he used to say when people asked him, do you think they're here among us? He used to love to say, no, that was my favorite question, because I always get to say, absolutely not. There's no evidence of that. It's ridiculous. He can't say that anymore, he says. He hasn't been able to say it for a long time. So, yeah.
So the running joke here, as far as I'm concerned, is that I'm Pleiadian, or at least part Pleiadian, and Mike is part Syrian. That's where he gets his sense of humor from, and that's where I get my blue eyes. I don't know if I'm joking or not half the time, and I don't know. It's true, and I can't fathom that. That's another thing. It's like, this can't be real. This is not part of the world as it was explained to me, as I observed. But on the other hand, there is this fascination with it, and I think that one of the indications is Star Trek. The first Star Trek episode I saw, it was like, oh my God, I'm home. I remember this. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't even know what that means, but you automatically respond in some deeply visceral way.
You respond at a gut level.
Yes, right. And you're immediately hooked. And you can't explain that to anybody who isn't.
Correct.
And I guess I kind of feel the same way about skinwalkers and UAPs. And all of this, it is borderline obsession. I think it's important because it's telling me what reality is, and that reality is very different from what I've been told. And that constant dissonance is haunting. I want to know. I have questions. I want to know the answers. And that's what this podcast is all about. We're going to keep looking for answers of all kinds. Mike, do you have anything else you want to say? We're going to probably wrap this episode up and go on to another one soon.
The only thing I would say as a parting, my parting gift to everybody, because you need to think about stuff. You need to consider You don't just look at what somebody on a video screen or in a book is telling you. You need to consider the context of what they're saying, when they said it, how they said it, but also how does it fit? How does it fit into everything else? The reason I bring this up as an example is what was I listening to last night? I think I believe it was Colm Kelleher and George Knapp on Kurt Jaimungal's podcast.
Theories of everything.
Theory of everything. And they were talking about cattle mutilation and the fact that NIDS wrote an inordinate number of different types of papers and dissertations that they put onto their old website, which apparently if you go to archive.org and use the Wayback Machine, you can get at that site. What they found with the cattle mutilations was that they thought that there was the original phenomenon where the cattle would be abducted, cut up, put back, exsanguinated, all of that stuff. But they said that they also found evidence of cattle mutilations that were clearly being done by people. They said that they found evidence of different types of drugs, sedatives that were used. And they also said that they found man-made tools, specifically needles, that were used under some of the corpses. So sounds like somebody got sloppy. That would be how I would characterize that. But I don't think ET gets sloppy. They haven't shown themselves to be sloppy, but people certainly are. So their supposition was that perhaps there is another small team of people under some type of government agency that is tracking something in the food, specifically prions that were in the cattle supply.
Which was the mad cow disease, I believe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my point is simply that you have to consider not just what you're hearing, but consider it in the context of what you already know. Because it's really hard to discern sometimes what's true and what's not when you're trying to parse through data and information in this stuff. The other thing that I would say is pay attention to your gut, because I don't know how many different stories I've heard over the years about abductions and that whole phenomenon. Nothing, not one of those stories affected me viscerally the way the first time I heard David Jacobs speak about it. That was gut level, oh crap, there is something to what this guy is saying. It's just hitting me that way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that people should be aware of. Not just about abductions, but about anything. Something hits you like that in the gut, you have a really strong reaction like that, chances are you're having that reaction for a reason other than perhaps what you're immediately consciously thinking of.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think I would just sum it up with be brave, keep an open mind. Don't shut down because you're afraid of what it might be that you need to consider. I think some people do that. I think there's fear and I think they just don't want to even consider it. So you need to stay open-minded, but don't be too gullible, too foolish. Well, if I use the old term, it's a razor's edge. You can't be too much one way or the other. I can't speak to the authenticity of abductions because I haven't been and don't believe that I have, so I can't swear that it's true because it didn't happen to me. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to someone else's story and
Right.
consider it and take it into consideration. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this time. Thank you so much. We're going to do it again. We've got a lot of interesting subjects that we're going to discuss. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on your favorite topics. Patreons are always welcome. Trolls will be deleted. Special thanks to Super Patreon Joe Pagana for his support and to Tom Mays for the music. You can email me at anomalytrain@protonmail.com and I will do my best to get right back to you. Lastly, thank you, Art Bell, wherever your soul is. I know it must be a happier place for you.